The night I made that promise, the rain was falling so hard it sounded like the sky itself was breaking apart. The streets of a quiet neighborhood in Ohio were nearly empty, the yellow glow of streetlights reflecting off puddles on the cracked pavement. I stood outside a small diner, soaked, tired, and ashamed of the life I had at 23. I had nothing, no money, no future, no plan. My pockets were empty, and my dreams felt just as hollow. Across from me stood a girl who had every reason to walk away from a man like me, but she didn't. That night, with my heart pounding and my voice trembling, I made a promise I had no idea how to keep. I told her that one day I would become someone worthy of her love. I told her I would build a life from nothing, and when I finally had something to offer, I would come back and marry her, and she simply smiled. If you believe that kindness, patience, and second chances still exist in this world, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who believes in love, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing stories that touch the heart. Her name was Hannah Carter. She had a quiet strength that made people feel calm just by standing near her. I had met her a year earlier when I was working the late shift washing dishes at that same diner in Columbus. She was a nursing student who came in every night after class, always ordering the same cheap coffee and studying for hours in the corner. Back then, I was just Lucas Bennett, a guy who had dropped out of college, buried under debt. Drifting through life with no direction, most people barely noticed me, but Hannah did. At first it was small things. She would smile when I brought her coffee. She would thank me like it actually mattered. Sometimes she left a few extra dollars in tips, even though she clearly didn't have much money herself. Slowly. We started talking. Those late-night conversations turned into walks after her study sessions. Walks turned into laughter. Laughter turned into something deeper that neither of us planned. But love isn't always simple when reality stands in the way. Hannah had dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse. She wanted to help children who didn't have anyone else. Her future was bright, structured, and full of purpose. Mine was chaos. I lived in a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a broken heater. My father had passed away years earlier, leaving behind debts I didn't know how to handle. My mother struggled just to survive. Every dollar I earned disappeared into bills before I could breathe. I loved Hannah more than anything, but I couldn't ignore the truth. She deserved better. One night, after the diner closed, we walked through the rain toward the bus stop, like we always did. The wind was cold, and the city felt strangely quiet. That's when I finally said the words that had been haunting me for months. I told her that loving her felt like holding something fragile while standing on the edge of a cliff. She deserved stability, a home, to someone who could give her the future she dreamed about. I told her I couldn't be that man yet, but one day, I would be. I promised that I would leave the city, find a way to build something real. In return, when I had finally become someone she could be proud of. It sounded foolish, even as the words left my mouth. Most people would have laughed. Most people would have walked away. But Hannah simply looked at me with those calm, patient eyes and said she would wait, not because she expected riches, not because she believed in fairy tales, but because she believed in me. The next morning, I left Ohio with a backpack, $200, and a promise that felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. The first years were brutal. I moved to Texas, working construction jobs that left my hands blistered and my body exhausted. I slept in shared apartments with strangers, and sometimes in my car when money ran out. There were nights I questioned everything, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered Hannah sitting in that diner booth, studying under the dim light with quiet determination. If she believed in me, couldn't quit, so I kept going. During the day, I worked construction. At night, I taught myself business skills through free online courses and borrowed books. Slowly, opportunity began to appear in unexpected places. Asterisk, a small contractor noticed how hard I worked and offered me a chance to supervise a crew. That position eventually led to managing projects. Years later, I saved enough money to start a small renovation company with 2 workers and an old pickup truck. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Asterisk, the business grew slowly, 1 house a day. Time. We renovated broken homes and turned them into places families could live again. Word spread, and more clients began to trust us. 5 years passed, then 7. Asterisk. And before I realized it, the man who once washed dishes in a diner owned a successful construction company with dozens of employees. The money came eventually, but strangely, it didn't feel like the victory I expected because there was always one question in my mind. Was Hannah still waiting? Asterisk, I had written letters during those early years, but life had become complicated, and eventually the letters stopped. I told myself I would return when everything was finally stable. Asterisk, 10 years after the promise. I drove back to Ohio. Asterisk, the city looked both familiar and completely different. Buildings had changed, streets had new stores, and the diner where we met had fresh paint on its walls. Asterisk, my heart pounded as I stepped inside. Asterisk, the smell of coffee hit me instantly, pulling memories out of the past like ghosts. Asterisk, the corner booth was still there, but Hannah wasn't. I sat down and ordered coffee, my hands shaking slightly. I asked the waitress if she knew a woman named Hannah Carter. She paused for a moment, then she smiled softly and said something that made my chest tighten. Asterisk, Hannah still came to the diner sometimes. Asterisk. She had become a pediatric nurse at the city hospital just like she always dreamed. And occasionally, after long shifts, she would sit in that same booth and drink coffee. Asterisk, the waitress added one more thing before walking away. Asterisk. She said Hannah never married. My heart felt like it stopped. Later that evening, I drove to the hospital. With a storm of emotions inside me, I didn't know what I would say. I didn't know if she still remembered the promise. Asterisk. But I knew I had to try. When I finally saw her walking through the hospital hallway, time seemed to freeze. She looked older, of course. 10 years changes everyone. The kindness in her eyes was exactly the same. Asterisk, for a moment. Neither of us moved. Then she slowly smiled. In that instant, I realized something powerful. The promise had never been about money. It had never been about becoming rich. It was about becoming the kind of man who keeps his word. We talked for hours that night, sharing stories about the years we spent apart. She told me about the children she helped in the hospital and the lives she watched change every day. I told her about the long road from construction worker to business owner. Asterisk. But the most important thing we shared was silence, the quiet understanding that some promises survive time. Asterisk, as the sun began rising over the city, I finally told her the truth. Asterisk, I said that every success I had built came from the strength. She gave me that rainy night outside the diner. Asterisk, without her belief, I might have stayed the same lost man forever. Asterisk, and in that moment I asked her if she still remembered the promise we made 10 years ago. Asterisk, if this story is touching your heart so far, take a moment to like the video. Share it with someone who believes in true love, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you emotional stories like this one. Asterisk, before the ending, I want to ask you something special. Asterisk, comment below. Promises still matter. Asterisk, because sometimes the world needs to be reminded that loyalty and patience still exist. Asterisk, Hannah didn't answer my question right away. Asterisk, instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out something small and worn. Asterisk, it was the bus ticket from the night I left Ohio. She had kept it for 10 years. That was her answer. Asterisk, a few months later, we stood in a small chapel surrounded by close friends and family. There were no grand displays of wealth, no extravagant decorations. Asterisk, just 2 people who had waited a decade to finish a sentence that life had paused. Asterisk, and when we said our vows, I realized something that changed the way I saw the world. Asterisk, becoming Rich had never been the real goal. Keeping a promise was, and sometimes, the greatest love stories aren't the ones that happen quickly. They are the ones that survive time. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or reminded you that real love still exists, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this.